So you think Terraria is easy, do you? You've been playing this game for years, let's say, and Terraria has become a breeze that you don't have to even think about winning, and you just do it. Master mode, piece of cake. Legendary, pish posh. It does not hold a candle up to you. Well, what if I told you imaginary person I made up in my head who also shows up every here and there in my comment section? What if I were to tell you that there is a very easy way to make Terraria quite difficult once again? This is the 1 HP hardcore challenge. In layman's terms, if you take damage, the run ends. That means any enemy, any projectile, fall damage, lava, traps, silly little thorns, everything and anything can kill you. It just takes one single tick of damage. Make it all the way to Moonlord and a slime runs onto your arena? Sorry, time to restart. You have failed. Now, this is a challenge I have never really seriously considered actually attempting or completing, but after doing so much hardcore as of late, I thought it might be fun giving this challenge a little go, and this video is about my experience with many attempts at this challenge and what I have learned and picked up along the way. That way, if you decide that you hate being a happy human being, you can take a crack at this challenge. First thing you should know is that you are going to stare at the world and character creator screens a whole lot, but once you get into the actual world, the first thing you should realize is that you get hit by slimes way more than you think. Oh, what was that? What? Oh, now I've played this game for some 11-ish years at this point, alright? I think I understand how slimes work, what their patterns are, what weapons are effective enough to push them back and keep them from hitting me, how to respond to their different jump heights, and all that good stuff. But after so many years of feeling comfortable in my slime knowledge, I've definitely become a little sloppy. It's one of those things where when you start, you're too cautious, and then you get good and you never have an issue with it, and then you get so familiar with it, you don't treat them with the seriousness needed to deal with them flawlessly. Maybe it's just me, but I doubt it. Slimes are going to end the vast majority of runs, and do so quite quickly. The first step in any 1 HP hardcore run I found was to chop a few trees and build a house. Sometimes I'll put the initial house off until near the first night of the first day in a typical run, but that is not the case when you can never be hit. This is in part because of the fact that slimes will often be spawning and attacking spawn soon after joining, but also because you need a safe place to return to where you're nearly guaranteed not to be hit. The basic wooden house is going to become your very best friend, and you're going to be evicted in the next 30 seconds in all likelihood. I found that I quite often would have this fun little house and then die as I tried to escape. Often the slimes would kill me just outside of my house, which I guess means the house might not have been necessary in the first place, but I think they were. The only reason I often tried to go and kill them was because I need gel for torches to make these suitable, as well as for exploring caves in the future. The guide is one of the best tools available, actually, for fending off these early slimes, as he's got a better weapon at the start than you do, but at the same time, he'll open doors and let the slimes in like any classic guide does, so keep an eye on him if you try to use him as your bodyguard. Even when he doesn't get you killed, though, there's no guarantee he'll actually do the killing. Anyways, I often would go to the left or the right and search for a nearby cave. Good world generation is your absolute best friend in this challenge. No cave near spawn, and you might as well just restart if you ask me. After several attempts, however, I believe it's best to mine a large chunk of dirt underneath your house. This large collection of blocks will be vital to survival. Sure, you can mine them as you go, but having a collection as a backup is just smart, and you find yourself using a whole lot more solid blocks than you'd think for a 1 HP hardcore run. While you're mining for dirt, you should also check for a hunk of stone to destroy. The little pokey copper short sword can serve you well enough against slimes, but as previously established, I know I personally am not nearly good enough at consistently avoiding slimes to trust myself with the pokey sword, so collecting a bunch of stone and wood with which to craft a metric ton of arrows and a bow is a literal lifesaver. Not to say it guarantees your survival. This is only slightly related, but making so many small worlds was a weird experience. I always make large and sometimes medium worlds, almost never small ones, and there's quite a wide variety of ways a small world can generate, while large and medium ones spawns tend to be pretty similar around the spawn area. I could find myself with a body of water one block to the left of spawn, or ones that were weird, messy terrain, and others that were just lovely to look at. Some spawns were littered with tall trees, while others had only a few tiny trees that were barely taller than a sapling, and the number of trees you have to cut down can really impact your survival, depending on how fast slimes are spawning. If there's only a couple of small trees and you're under attack, it'll be hard to get a very fast start, but spawns with a bunch of tall trees gave you plenty of wood once you fell just a few. On the flip side, however, I found that the spawns with the smaller trees usually had stone that was a whole lot more accessible. Sometimes there's hardly any stone near spawn, or you have to go into a cave to gather some. I guess you could just mine some of the dirt around spawn, but that's not really fun. In the end, it matters little, since I don't think anybody is going to be generating worlds until they get a spawn that they're happy with, but this little difference does change how you approach the start. I also found myself utilizing the wooden sword, which I often ignore as a weapon, and of course, because I only get 1 health, there is no point in crafting wooden armor, or hardly any armor for that matter. I guess most armor in the game does technically give some sort of buff outside of the defense, but wood and naturally generated ores do not offer a buff that would be helpful in any way. Having 1 life really did change a lot of my thinking, as in a typical hardcore run, you'd want to collect healing potions and craft armor as soon as possible for the sake of survival, but neither of them are necessary or even all that useful when you can't take a single hit. Okay, that's enough about the surface. Time to focus on the underground, the place I managed to reach maybe 3 times, because every other time the slimes killed me on the surface after a couple of minutes. The first thing to know about the caves is that giant worms are your absolute worst enemy. Thankfully, I pretty much never ran into these things, somehow, but being aware that they can spawn at any time and they can't really be seen, only heard, it messes with you. They are particularly freaky when you first get into the caves. When I started the 100 hours of hardcore challenge, 3 of these stupid worms spawned 10 seconds after entering the first cave, and so I hadn't managed to collect a single recall potion I could use to retreat with. And I took several hits as I attempted to escape, but of course, I can't take those several hits when I'm on 1 HP. So you go into the caves with nothing more than a hope and a prayer that you'll get a recall potion or magic mirror before a worm finds you. Or really, just about any other enemy for that matter. As you descend, you really quickly learn how far you can actually fall before taking fall damage. Or at least you should. I never did, because I never died to fall damage like the absolute Terraria legend I am. Minecart tracks are one of my favorite things to find in any run, as they often lead to treasure, and even if they don't, they provide you with free caves to explore. This is still the case in 1 HP hardcore, but it's very easy to accidentally run into enemies while riding one of these things. It's possible you'll hit and kill the enemy without incurring damage, but I found this inconsistent at best. It's probably best to just walk along the rails rather than ride them. While in the caves, of course, you gotta look for those recall potions and other treasure chests, but you also need to spend some time gathering different ores. There's no need for armor, which means you need a whole lot less ore than you might typically want, but gathering silver or tungsten in particular is an easy way to craft upgraded tools and a bow. I've actually been finding a much greater appreciation for the mid-tier ores of the game. Platinum and gold are great and all, but they are much more rare. Well, maybe not that much more rare, but it's much easier to find silver and tungsten and making gear from them. The end goal, obviously, is to have platinum or gold armor, unless you're going for a specific class build, but the mid-tier stuff is genuinely useful even for a Terraria veteran such as myself. You'll also find yourself boxing yourself in with blocks whenever mining. Enemies start spawning immediately upon stopping, and sometimes a bunch would collect right beneath me. This is another reason to make a bow and arrows quickly so farming like this can be done. Now, traps were something I surprisingly didn't run into all that much, but obviously you gotta keep a sharp eye out for them. Perhaps doing some regular hardcore has already taught me to be quite weary of these things, because traps can easily ruin a hardcore run, even very late in the game depending on the type of trap. These are more dangerous, obviously, when any of these traps is a guaranteed death, assuming you don't dodge them. I don't know, I look out for traps, in particular the ones in water. Those are always the hardest ones to spot in my opinion, and I often feel safe when jumping into water just because it's water. Who would put a trap down there? That makes no sense. Nobody would be silly enough to do that. Looking at you, Relogic. This has nothing to do with this challenge, but I found this one tree halfway down a naturally generated cave, and I had no idea this was even possible. One thing you obviously want to find in caves is treasure chests, and it's kind of funny what is actually useful in them. Rope, arrows, wood, recall potions, all of them are just fantastic. And these are always going to be good in any run, but they're particularly helpful when you have 1 health, okay? The accessories are as useful as they would be in just about any other run. Climbing claws or a wand of sparking are definitely the ones that I want the most for either the mobility or better weapon, but it can be good just to have literally anything. It's also weird not wanting any of the defensive modifiers. Getting the crit strike or damage increases are all that I'm after, and defense might as well be no modifier at all. What I wanted most each time when I headed into the caves was a cloud in a bottle. That way I could easily break my fall when I either make a mistake or else use it intentionally to make exploring that much easier. I had 0 luck with finding the cloud in a bottle in all but one of the runs that I attempted. I did find the band of regen a time or 2, which is fantastic. Another method for breaking your fall, and the one that I suppose you have a little more control over, is a grappling hook. They're arguably more important and better than the cloud in a bottle, but also run the risk of you missing your target and plummeting to your death anyways. They also require you to either get a lucky drop from a piranha, and you better believe I avoided those little biters, or else collect 15 of any of the gems, which, depending on the world gen, can either take 5 minutes or 5 hours. I hardly ever did find things like spelunker potions, but drinking 1 or 2 of these in tandem with a mining potion can give you enough ore to make just about anything that you might want. Realistically, these ores are going to be used almost solely for bows and pickaxes. I would often make an axe as well when I had some extra, and I suppose a stopwatch is generally pretty useful, but I never got far enough to really have a need to know the time of day. Glowing mushroom biomes are the godsend they always have been. These things tend to have plenty of treasure, though as of late, I get the sense that there's kind of 3 kinds of glowing mushrooms: the ones with nothing, the ones with treasure, and the ones with heart crystals. Get lucky with a treasure mushroom biome and you're golden, but if you stumble across a heart crystal one, then you might as well have found nothing. It's kind of goofy how heart crystals serve literally no function. I collect so many of these in any run, first for full health and second for the arenas, which I guess is something that's a bit easier with 1 HP. You don't need to worry about any passive buffs from things like campfires and heart lanterns and bat statues. None of those buffs are actually going to help you in any real way. Glowing mushrooms, however, despite the great treasure you can find in them, are still one of the most dangerous places that you could visit. I swear there are higher enemy spawns in these biomes. Maybe it's just me, maybe I'm not going crazy though, and there genuinely are a lot more enemy spawns in glowing mushrooms. A lot of people could point towards the bats being an issue, and I know a lot of people who hate bats and get killed by them often, but I didn't think they were an issue at all. With a wooden sword, or really any upgrade to the starting copper short sword, you can fend off these little rats with wings without any issue. They are quite vulnerable to knockback, and especially when you have a weapon that swings around your head, it's unlikely you'll miss an attack against them. That's not to say one didn't end any of my runs, as there was one bad that brought what might have been a good attempt to a very premature end. I had also forgotten to enable the 1 HP mod during that run, it would seem, so if you're wondering why I'm still alive, that would be why, but I took a hit, so it's time to trash the character world and start again. There was only one run where I made some actual progress, and ironically it was the very first one. All the dying to slimes and hardly getting away from spawn, yeah, those are all the attempts after my first attempt. So I guess there really is something to be said about your first attempt being your best one. Do people say that? I don't know, perhaps it's just luck. This first attempt even had me doing things I wouldn't have suggested to anyone, but in hindsight, I think this could be a good strategy. The tundra ended up being really close to spawn, and my naturally generated cave happened to go straight into it. The tundra is wonderful because of the snowball cannon, flurry boots, and blizzard in a bottle that can be found down there. In the regular golden chests and regular caves, you can get the cloud in a bottle, which is fine, and Hermes boots are the same as flurry boots in every way but the sprite, but regular golden chests have, what, the mace as their best weapon? The snowball cannon is perhaps one of the best pre-hard mode ranger weapons that you could ask for, or maybe pre-boss ranger weapons. This makes the tundra one of the best places to be to get all the gear you're looking for in pre-hard mode, which isn't something that really occurred to me until doing this 1 HP hardcore challenge. I almost never get the snowball cannon soon enough for the thing to be useful, and perhaps this is just because I'm playing on small worlds rather than large worlds, because on large worlds, getting to the tundra, it can be a bit of a trek, but if you're lucky with the world generation on a small one, then the tundra can be right next to spawn like it was in this one. So if there was a world seed or type that I would be looking for in a 1 HP hardcore challenge, it would be one with the tundra next to spawn with an easily accessible cave. There wasn't a single world that spawned with a living tree next to me, which was kind of sad. I would think those would also be very helpful, but I guess I have no opinion on it. Just look out for the gnomes. That's not to say there aren't some unique dangers to the underground tundra, however. But before talking about them, I do believe giant worms do not spawn in the tundra, and that would mean there are no worm enemies at all in the frozen wasteland, so that alone could make this one of the best places to be. But the other enemies are perhaps more problematic than it's worth for avoiding worms. For one, there's the flinks. Having the summon that can be crafted from these guys' fur is invaluable. So you'll want to kill them, but the massive amounts of knockback they take can easily make you chase them straight into a death trap. Pinning them against the wall is almost essential. The bats down here would also seem to be a little bit more dangerous than the ones in regular caves. Undead Vikings I just avoided rather than attacking. Maybe they aren't that much of a problem really, but I wasn't going to risk it. I guess they could be easier than skeletons you'd encounter in regular caves though, because some of them, those skeletons, you know, they throw bones. And, well, those are nasty, alright? That's not fun. The worst enemy to encounter is the frozen spiked slime. These are still slime, so making a little box around them can negate the problem entirely, but it's an enemy that, for all intents and purposes, has a gun, and sometimes it shoots a shotgun. Just don't fight them, I never did. Now, when I did find myself with a snowball cannon, I was in a pretty good spot to clear most of the early game. I was looking at killing King Slime and finishing off at least one boss, which would have been enough for me, but in the same run I did a dumb and mined one too many blocks, which resulted in me being shot by a salamander. 1 HP hardcore is an absolutely stupid difficulty and one that I just don't think should be attempted if you care about your sanity, but I thought it would be a good time to just see what it's like because it does change how you approach the game. I'm probably never going to come back to this challenge because after the attempts dragged into the double digits, the fun was ending and the frustration was settling in. There's only so many times you can restart a character in the world before it drives you a little crazy. I'm going to stick with my longer format runs that just keep on going and just keep on going. But maybe if people like these videos enough, I'll put in a few more attempts to see if I can at least take down King Slime. Speaking of, if you'd like to see a full detailed video about the run with the snowball cannon that lasted for quite a while, you can watch that video right here.